Prior to teaching at BYU, we said, prior to teaching at BYU, Dr. Lunt taught at Utah State University in Logan for 2 years and at Snow College in Ephraim for 4 years, where he was also the program coordinator for the electronics technology program. And prior to teaching in academia, Barry was a design engineer for IBM in Tucson, Arizona, where he designed integrated circuits and printed circuit boards for the 1/2-inch tape drives. He's got some cool displays in his office. If you ever walk by and ask him to see it, he showed me one time very enthusiastically some of these things. Dr. Lund has done research in permanent digital data storage, materials used in electronics, manufacturing of electronic devices, and has consulted for several companies in Utah and has served as an expert witness in cases involving electronic products. He's also been involved at the national and international level in defining the curriculum for information technology and computing disciplines overall. We are exceptionally fortunate to have someone like Dr. Lunt in our department, and I'm really looking forward to hearing his talk about faith in his career. So let's give him a warm welcome.
I appreciate your willingness to spend time doing this, and I earnestly hope to make it worth your while. One of the things that I've greatly enjoyed here at Brigham Young University is the freedom to talk about anything that is true, particularly religious things. I've taught elsewhere, as you heard in my introduction, and there you really can't do that. And so one of the first things that I realized is that I wanted to take advantage of that opportunity here at BYU in whatever unique way I felt was right. And what I felt was right early on in my years of teaching here was to start my classes with the thought of the day. So I'm going to do that if the slide works, which it's not working now. Also not working. Okay. So this is one of the thoughts of the day that is one of my wife and my favorites. And boy, the angle here is just not very conducive to that. So pardon me for moving around here. Men and women who turn their lives over to God will discover that He can make a lot more out of their lives than they can. He will deepen their joys, expand their vision, quicken their minds, strengthen their muscles, lift their spirits, multiply their blessings, increase their opportunities, comfort their souls, raise up friends, and pour out peace. In that list, President Benson makes 10 very specific promises that relate to this life. And I want to share some things with you tonight to help you know that I've experienced them all. They are real. They're not platitudes. These things really come from God, and He can make a massive difference in your lifetime. And then He makes the promise, which we're told is the greatest of all blessings of God: whosoever will live his life in the service of God will find he has eternal life. This is something my wife and I care a great deal about. So as I grew up, I grew up in a little town named Duncan, Arizona. Anybody know where Duncan, Arizona might be? One. Yeah, it's not very well known. So for those who don't know, which is just about everybody else, you can see that little red dot that's on the border of New Mexico and Arizona. And you can see Phoenix on the far left of the image there, and Tucson down from there, and Duncan on the border of New Mexico and Arizona. Population about 700 people, and we lived out on a farm. Well, why does that matter? Because I'm going to tell some stories about growing up that relate directly to God in my life. I grew up with 5 brothers. You can see my oldest brother pulling the wagon there. That's me standing up on the very back. And that's my household home, my childhood home, way back long ago. I milked a cow every day. So I've milked a cow at least 3,000 times. Seriously. It's one of the things that cows don't take a day off. There are no days off. And you have to milk twice a day. But I had a brother that took the other shift. So I took either the morning shift or the evening shift. One of the things that we did in this farm in Arizona was haul hay. And one of the things that we would sometimes do is sell that hay to a place that was 20, maybe 50 miles away or more. which meant we had to put it on a truck, not just a trailer that we would pull with a tractor. When you load hay on a truck, you have to make sure that you load it carefully so that the sides are square, the top is nice and flat, the ends are nice and straight, and then you tie it all together. I very distinctly remember this one time that my older brother and I were loading hay out of a barn. So the barn had hay stacked up about 10 levels high, so it was easy to throw it onto the truck and then stack it as you went. And I remember the very distinct feeling that something was going to go wrong with this stack. I knew that that's a serious problem. So every time I put a bale, I made extra careful to put it on just right. I didn't understand what was going to go wrong because I had stacked thousands of bales of hay. And so we finally finished stacking all 6 tiers. The tier was six layers high and 2 bales deep, so it held 30 bales. That was a ton. And then this truck was 6 tiers long, so that was a 6-ton truck. And so we had them stacked 6 high, and that's from the top of the bed of the truck. So the bed of the truck's right about here, and so the top of the stack is really high. It's easy to reach when you're in the barn, right? You can just put them down from on there. So I thought, well, nothing has gone wrong. The stack was perfect. Everything seemed to be just fine, and I still had the feeling something's going to go wrong. As I got in the truck to pull out so that we could put the chains around the ends of this and then tie it in because we'd backed right up to the barn where we couldn't get in there. I started to pull out and my brother yells at me, "Stop!" And I realized when I hit the brakes real quick, what had happened when I went around back to see. The back tier had caught on a bale that was sticking out from the barn. And in my pulling it away for about 3 feet was all, it pulled that entire back tier off. Now, it didn't damage anything. Nobody got hurt. No bales were even broken, but it did add about 20 minutes of extra work, and you had to take the bales from the ground now instead of up at the elevation they were in the barn, and you had to get them up onto that bed, and then you had to throw them clear up onto the top, so make sure you put enough on the top that you can put them back down onto the stack. Anyway, it was a pain. One of the main things that taught me is that God cares about everything that you do, and He can give you inspiration. If I had known exactly what to do with that feeling, I would have looked at that stack and how it would have caught on the barn as I pulled out, and I would have fixed that problem. I didn't. Another experience was loading hay from a field. This is a really common thing. Most of the time, the bales would be just left out in the field like that, and then would come along, one person driving the tractor, and usually one on each side of the trailer, picking bales up and putting them onto the trailer, and another person stacking them onto the trailer. And so we'd drive those trailers off the field like that. And I remember one night having the most interesting dream. And to this day, I believe the only reason I had that dream was so that I would know that God can do things like this for you. In that dream, I counted all the bales, and I did math in my head and knew exactly how many trailers it would take to finish all those bales. And I knew exactly how many bales would be on the last trailer. Not on the ones in between, but the very last trailer. I knew exactly how many bales would be on that. The next day, my brother and I loaded that field up, and guess what? I was absolutely right. Every single trailer had the exact number of bales that I had seen in my dream, and the last trailer had exactly the number of bales in the same place that I thought they would be. Again, there was no need for me to know that. It didn't change at all how we loaded that field. But it changed me forever because God can give us that information, even when we don't really need it. That's one of my favorite stories. After I finished my years on the farm, I served a mission in Argentina, came back and started education here at BYU. And as you heard in my introduction, I then started work for IBM in Tucson, Arizona, working on half-inch tape products. This circuit board that you see there, which I have with me, they were kind enough to let me take it with me, is 6 tracks of an 18-track tape drive. It takes the signal off the tape and converts it back to ones and zeros, because it isn't ones and zeros when you read it back from the tape, and it never really is. And I also designed this circuit right here, the one in the middle. That was one of the integrated circuits that I designed in my years there at IBM. I remember one day working in the lab with one of the technicians. And he and I had spent about 2 hours chasing down a problem on this board. The name of the board was ICDC. That's just the name that we had given it. And I was so frustrated I couldn't figure out what to do because neither he nor I could figure out the source of the problem. So I left him and went back to my office. And thankfully, my office mate was a quiet soul. And I just said a silent prayer. And I remember looking at the picture of my wife and the children that we had at the time. And I just said a prayer. I need help. I don't know what's wrong. And after a couple of minutes, I felt clarity. My mind lifted. The frustration I was feeling was gone. I went back into the lab, and within 3 minutes, we found the source of the problem, which of course meant that we could fix it. Again, God knows everything. He knows how to help you. In this case, I wasn't given the solution to the problem. I was given the peace and clarity of mind so that I could find the solution, and we did. Again, another wonderful lesson to me that God cares about what we do, and He can help in many, many ways. My wife and I have always tried to live our lives by asking what the Lord would like us to do, professionally, in the church, doing whatever He would want us to do. And both of us remember feeling that IBM would not be my permanent occupation. And I kept thinking, well, why not? I love it. I remember every day of the week waking up thinking, I get to go to work. Yeah, I'm excited. And I remember on Saturday and Sunday, I get to stay home with my family. Yes. There wasn't a day of the week that I didn't look forward to. It was a huge blessing. And I look back on that thinking, wow, God is really good. But I still never felt like, neither of us felt like it would be our permanent job. So we kept praying. And finally, my wife came across an ad for a job at Snow College in Ephraim, Utah. Anybody know where Snow College, Ephraim is? Lots of you. Okay. Interestingly, we felt to go ahead and interview, so we went to drive down there. We stopped, if you know Sanpete Valley, if you come from the north, from the Thistle route rather than the Nephi route, you come down into Mount Pleasant first. And as a place on the road that you could pull off, we stopped, and both my wife and I felt that we should just have a little prayer. So we prayed about the experience and made sure that we were still doing the right thing. And we both said to each other, we feel like they're going to offer us the job and we're going to turn it down. And then we asked each other, should we go ahead and interview then if we know that we're going to turn it down? But we felt like it was the right thing to go ahead and interview, so we did. And they did offer the job, and we did turn it down. So I worked at IBM another year, and they contacted me about 9-10 months later and said, Barry, we've never filled the job. Are you interested in interviewing again? We have obtained some additional state funds, and we can offer you a bigger salary. I had no feeling that I would ever get a different offer or that it would entail more money. But we did feel again that we should interview. We went up and interviewed. They offered the job. This time we accepted. That was a big difference in our lives. It was a major cut in pay, but it wasn't as major as it would have been if they hadn't had that extra money. So yeah, we got to go to Snow College. And honestly, we loved it there. There wasn't anything about our time there that we didn't love. And again, it was the same thing. I loved every day of the week because I loved going to work and I loved being at home with the family. So there's a picture of us up Ephraim Canyon, the 4 of us, 4 children and my wife, at a big tree, the old Sherman tree, they call it, up Ephraim Canyon. 4 years. Now, the interesting thing that happened next, my office was in this building, and between there and the office where the mail was about 100 feet. So every day I'd make the trek over to the building and get the mail. And this summer, the summer of 1990, I very much had the feeling almost every day, the thought would come to me, you will not be here this fall. Okay, where will I be? Every day I asked that question. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? The answer didn't come. Didn't come. As I recall, it was about early August, first or second day of August. The answer came, go get your PhD. I knew exactly what that was about because I had already investigated potential possibilities because I was loving it at Snow and I thought I want to teach the rest of my life. Probably ought to have a PhD to teach college. And so we did that. We put the home on the market, sold right away. We put a bunch of furniture and a truck on the market, and they sold right away. And applied to Utah State in August for the September start. Took the GRE cold, was admitted to Utah State, and got in and started just like that. God knows timing extremely well. I testify to that. I can't believe that that happened, but it did. And it was incredible. So I spent 2 years and had almost completely finished my PhD and had stayed in touch with my good friends here at BYU in the electronics engineering technology program. They were staying in touch with me because they knew they had an opening coming up and they wanted me to apply for it. The problem was that the opening wasn't coming up until 1991, and I was going to be finishing my, 1993, and I was going to be finishing my PhD in 1992. So, and here's another way that God can do things, and this always amazes me. A professor named Merrill Smart, some of you may have known him, had the impression that he should go ahead and take a 1-year sabbatical so that there would be an opening. Because the year after that, Ivan Holt was going to retire, and therefore there would be a permanent slot available. So Merrill Smart found an opening down at Novell, and he spent a year working for them, and I filled his slot in a temporary position. And then after he retired, after Ivan Holt retired, Merrill came back to his regular slot, and I applied and was given the slot of Ivan Holt. Again, just another way that God can work on people. I didn't ask Merrill Smart to take a sabbatical. And it didn't matter to me where I went for my next job. I just know that I needed to have one. Because you can't stay being a PhD student forever. So yeah, we went from Snow College to Utah State, not really knowing where we would go next. But again, God opened the door, and we came here to BYU in 1992. There's another story that I don't have any slide for, but I feel like I want to share that. I was in my senior year here at BYU, and it was fall semester. I was hoping to graduate in April. I was about two-thirds of the way through the semester in November, like right about now, needing to consider what classes to sign up for winter semester, and saw that there was one class that I did not have that I needed to sign up for. Guess what? It was not being offered in winter semester. I did everything I could to figure out how to find a way around that. There was no way around it. Bottom line is I'd have to stay clear until December, 9 months more, to take one class. Yeah, you can imagine how frustrated I was. So I talked with my wife about it. We prayed about it, and she said, "Barry, have you ever considered a master's?" "No, never considered a master's." "Look into it. I think you can take some master's classes while you're still an undergrad." So I looked into it, and I did. I took three classes, 9 credit hours, the fall semester, took another bunch in the winter semester, and by the August, 1 year later, I'd finished my master's degree. We just kind of did things on the fast track. But the door was opened, a door that I would never have considered going into. But because one door closed and we were praying, God opened another door. And that door made a huge difference in my professional career, and I'm really grateful for that. Okay, so Utah State until 1992, and then I got the job here at BYU. One of my early jobs was, research areas rather, was learning how to measure the cure state of polymers, like glues. Well, glues aren't conductive. In fact, they're very good resistance materials, but they change their resistance substantially as they cure. And so I was working on something we later called cross-check with Brent Strong. And I came up with the idea of an interdigitated electrode. I did some research on that and found out that it was a pretty good idea. So you just take one side of your signal and put it through another side here through these fingers that don't actually touch, but they're electrodes, electricity. You make a little circuit board with these, what we call a comb electrode or interdigitated electrodes. And then you put the glue on that. And then you apply a low frequency signal, like 1 or 2 hertz. And you have to make it AC so that you don't build up charge, because this material doesn't behave the same under DC that it does under AC. So we measured the AC resistance of it, and it worked super well. And so I thought, wonder if we can measure the amount of moisture in electronic packaging material, which is commonly called Novolac. It's an epoxy phenolic mix. And so I thought, I bet we can do that. So we took this chamber and we put the chamber so we could put water in the chamber or take the water out and put a desiccant in there. And by circulating the air pretty good, you could make it a completely dry chamber or a high humidity chamber. And I thought, we can measure the amount of moisture in a material as a function of its resistivity. And so I wrote a paper and submitted it to a conference saying that that's what we could do. And we hadn't proven that we could. So I saved these very plots. I've saved them for these many, many years because this to me is one of the most amazing miracles that God worked in my life, in my research. And that is, I predicted that we could do it. And the Wednesday before I had to leave for the conference, we got the results on the left side of the plot there. And on the right side are the results we got on Friday, the day I had to leave, or the day before I had to leave for the conference. These results showed that we could not only sense it, but do it extremely well. It's hard to read that, but what we see here is the resistance of the sample in a dry environment. So as you get it dry, the material goes way, way up. It goes up by 5 orders of magnitude in resistance as it gets dry. But when you remove the moisture, it drops back down. Not as much, it drops down about 3 orders of magnitude. And this happens over a matter of about half an hour. This change here, this quick one, this one happens over a course of about 3 to 4 hours. You can see the numbers there. It was fabulous. God knew that long before I did, because I felt very clear about submitting this paper and saying that we could do it. But I didn't prove that we could until the Friday before I left for the conference. I know that's risky, but when you feel it's right and the Lord helps, it's incredible. So it's just still one of my favorite stories. It gives me tingles when I think about how God can do that. Another experience I had was really formative in my career here at BYU, and that is, it's kind of hard to become a full professor at BYU. The number of hurdles you have to jump is pretty significant. And I really didn't know what I was going to do to make that happen. But I remember one year, 1999 or 2000, we were told that we needed to change from being EET to IT, information technology. And it was just a decision that we were given. We didn't really have any say in the matter. So we thought, okay, if we're going to do that, let's do it the very best way possible. So we found a bunch of other IT programs in the country, and we invited them to come to a conference up at Aspen Grove here, just up the canyon. Beautiful place. And it was December of 2001 that we invited everybody to come. And one of the things that we planned to do at this conference was define what things should you teach in an IT curriculum. Clearly, that's a really important decision, right? And I remember we were having a discussion about this, and I said, I know how we can do that. We can do what we call a sticky notes exercise. How many of you ever done one of these sticky notes exercises? Some of you have, yeah. They're really interactive and super effective. The idea is everybody that's there, and we invited only the ones who are experts in what's being taught in an IT program, everybody gets their pad of sticky notes, and they write a topic on it. Networking, cybersecurity, human-computer interaction, and of course, details under each of those. They just put them all out there. And you start putting these sticky notes up, and then of course as you're writing your sticky notes, you see what other people have written, and it jogs your mind, and you think, oh yeah, that reminds me we should put this topic on. So you just write hundreds of these sticky notes, and you just stick them on the wall. And that goes on for about an hour. So everybody gets this chance to give input. Fabulous way to do it. And then after that hour, everybody starts looking at them and putting them in categories. Oh, this one fits in networking. This one fits in cybersecurity. And pretty soon you've organized all of these topics into categories. Now you build a spreadsheet. Somebody captures it all and puts it in a spreadsheet. This became the core of the IT model curriculum. And because I had volunteered to conduct this sticky notes exercise, which again in my mind was a small thing to do because it wasn't hard, I became the chair of the committee that wrote the model curriculum. There's my name as the chair, and there's the 2008 model curriculum. So I met with these guys, these 8 other people, for literally hundreds of hours. And it was incredible. These people were from lots of other places, and they were incredible professionals. And we're all doing this just because we wanted to do it. We weren't getting any extra pay for it. And we were taking a lot of time out of our hide. I remember missing a number of general conferences and a number of other things that I would rather be here for to do these meetings, mostly on weekends, always on weekends. It is an extremely good experience for me. Out of that grew my involvement in defining the model curriculum for IT for 2017. I wasn't the chair of that, but I was on the committee, because about every 10 years you update the model curriculum. I should mention that these are produced by, as you can see there, no, it doesn't show that. Oh yeah, Association for Computing Machinery and the IEEE Computer Society. These are worldwide organizations. So when they publish something like this, it's influential in the whole world. And I got invited to go to a number of countries and present about this. And that was pretty awesome. And then I also got invited to be part of the CC 2005 document, which is computing curricula defined for computer engineering, computer science, information systems, information technology, and software engineering. In other words, if you ever want to know what the differences are or similarities are among these 5 programs in computing, this is the document you reference. And again, worldwide significance. And again, I got to be part of that committee. Then, of course, there was an update to that, CC 2020. So that's 15 years later, and they come up with a new definition of these programs. But now it includes 2 more, cybersecurity and data science. And again, I got to be on the committee to do that. And those involvements, with a whole bunch of associated papers that I wrote on it too, became the core of what became my full professor package. Just because I did something simple, it started with the sticky notes exercise. Okay. One of the things that I feel very strongly about is that when the time for you to be ready to do something comes, it's too late to prepare. And that's exactly what happened for our family in 2004. We had a son who was living in Cedar City, going to SUU. He was 19 and a half years old. He was not really involved in the church. And we were learning to deal with that. One Sunday, he had brought a few things home, including his suit. And I remember hanging his suit up in my closet. And the Spirit said to me, he will wear this again, but not of his own choice. I did not know what that meant. On April 15th, 2004, we learned that our son had taken his life. And the suit that he wore in that casket was the suit that I hung up in the closet. He didn't choose it, but he wore it again. The time to prepare for something like that is long before it happens. And probably the main thing I remember experiencing during those difficult days was an incredible amount of peace. This is right between semesters, right at the end of the April semester and the start of the spring term. We will never forget starting classes on the Monday after his funeral, feeling as clear as I could ever feel, feeling peaceful, feeling directed, feeling supported and helped. This goes back to that quote that I started with. Pour out peace is one of the things that President Benson promised. He can do that better than anybody. And it's incredible. You can get through things that you never thought you could get through, that you never want to get through, but you can. I remember a couple of times feeling that pain of missing our son was so acute that it was physical. It was like a spear. I mean, it squeezing. It was really painful. It wasn't just emotional, it was physical. And it would go away every time I prayed, always. And I'm deeply grateful for that. God can do amazing things in your life. All right, another area that I've done a lot of research in, as was mentioned on my resume or introduction, is permanent digital data storage. And let me just tell a little bit about the story behind why this matters to me. Way back in about 1996, I was on a trip down to 9 Mile Canyon. Anybody know where 9 Mile Canyon is north of Price? 1, 2, yeah. Great place to visit if you like petroglyphs. So here's a picture that I took of a petroglyph that's there. And unbeknownst to me, before I'd ever visited there, petroglyphs are not made by painting, they're made by chipping. So you can see the layer of rock is kind of dark, and you chip away that outer layer and you get a lighter layer underneath. And that's what we call optical contrast, dark spots and light spots. And I thought, oh, that's very much like how CDs work. CDs have dark spots and light spots, and that's the ones and zeros of data. And I didn't make anything of that. But then in 2005, I had a digital camera for a while, and the saying is always, it used to be, if your house is burning and you know your children are safe, the first thing you go back to save is your photo albums. Because none of you may be aware of this, but it used to be that pictures were expensive. You had to buy film and you had to make sure you chose the right pictures just right, because you didn't just take 3 or 4 because they had to be developed, and those were expensive as well. And you didn't just shoot lots of pictures for nothing, because they're free today. Costs you absolutely nothing to take a picture. But back in the day, they were very expensive, and you'd put them in photo albums, and they were precious memories, irreplaceable. So I thought, wow, I've got all these digital pictures. How do I store them? I knew that compact discs were ephemeral. I knew that hard disk drives crashed regularly. I knew that solid state drives didn't exist at the time and were very minimal in capacity. 1 megabyte maybe on your little flash drive, but you didn't have SSDs. And then magnetic tape. And I knew that magnetic tape was somewhat ephemeral, but it's not really available to consumers because they're expensive. So, and by the way, this is an example of half-inch tape. And if you think half-inch tape is not used too much today, you are way wrong. There are tens of millions of these sold every year and very heavily used in data centers, but not by consumers. The cartridge itself is about $40 to $60, and the drive itself is about $6,000 to $10,000. So you're not going to go out and buy one just for fun. But anyway, I realized that there was nothing permanent to store it on, and I thought, we need to fix this. So I applied for research, got some money, got some people to join me, and we came up with the M-Disk. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but there's a package of them. Here's a separate one. And we tested it, and it does last 1,000 years. How do you test it how do you test in a few months 1,000 years? Well, you accelerate the temperature, the humidity, and the light. And we found that ours just did a dance on the beach. They had no problem at all with that. And we tested against the very best optical discs out there, and they all crashed and burned. They died. Where ours just, hey, this is a stroll on the beach. So we had a lot of fun with that. We started this company in 2008. Nobody cared. Seriously, we sold very few of these, and the company went under. So I didn't get rich. No, didn't happen at all. But it was exciting because we made something that really worked. The offshoot of that is the research that I'm still doing today. I don't have a slide of this one, but we've come up with a different way to store your data in solid state, like flash drive, but instead of being temporary, flash drives only last, by the way, about 8 to 10 years before some of your data has evaporated. But with the process that we were using, which was PROM, we overcame the silicide problems with the previous version of PROM and came up with a version that produced no failures and would last 1,000 years. And that is actually being developed into a product by another company right now. Again, I'm not getting any royalties from that, no money coming into my pocket at all, but it's a successful product for a limited market. And then the other thing that we're working on is what we call Nano Libris, of course, meaning a very small book. And if you can see by the scale bars on that, the characters that we're writing are in the scales of about 2 to 3 microns, keeping in mind that your hair is about 70 microns in diameter. So we could put 30, 45 characters across the width of your hair. And that's not our target dimension. Our target dimension is about 1/10 of that. And by calculations that we've done, we could put all 167 million volumes of the Library of Congress on a single tape like this. And that would be the world's largest collection of data in the world. And we're working on that, having good success. A lot of work left to do on that, but it's exciting. And the biggest thing that we're working on in there, not only high density, but permanent. We're using a substrate that is going to last 1,000 years. We're using materials that will last 1,000 years. And we're making permanent changes to those materials so that those will last 1,000 years. And it will be human readable. So you don't need a special device that also lasts 1,000 years. Because that's one of the big problems with storing something 1,000 years. You have to have a readback mechanism. All you have to have is something that magnifies it. And if there aren't microscopes in 1,000 years, what happened to Leeuwenhoek and all the things that he taught us, right? So yeah, we think that it will work, and we've definitely had some fun doing research in that area. Now I want to talk about the challenge of handling the busiest time of my life. This was winter semester 2008. I remember that I had 4 classes to teach. Our usual load is 2. 2 of those were new prep. And for me, a new prep is about the equivalent of 3 classes. So 1 new prep That's pretty much everything. But I had 2 new preps and 2 courses that I'd regularly taught before. Wow. And I had the busiest calling in my life in the church. And I was in this startup company, Millenniata. And if any of you know anything about small businesses, you spend a massive amount of time working to, I was on the board trying to get this business going. When I look back on it, I can't say anything but miracles. I remember many, many times doing things that I thought would take me an hour or at least half an hour, and I'd get them done in 5 to 7 minutes. This happened over and over and over for months. I do not know how God warps time, folks, but I can tell you that He does. It's happened to me too many times. It's a miracle. I can't explain it in any other way. The other big thing that I experienced during those years, those months, was peace. You would think I'd be overly stressed, that I'd go home with a sick stomach or some kind of malady because of the stress. I hardly felt any stress. I felt excitement. I felt peace. I felt thrilled to be able to work on these things. And it was incredible. That was the busiest years of my life. Well, I have 3 concluding slides here that are no more stories about me, but stories about things that I believe with all my heart. First of all, this one says, what is the nature of matter and what is the nature of spiritual things? Way back in 1911, Ernest Rutherford did an experiment that we show a picture of here. At the time, they had, the plum pudding model and maybe some other model that they didn't fully understand. But the idea of a nucleus and electrons orbiting about the nucleus didn't exist at the time. So he's trying to figure out what the nature of matter is. So he gets a very thin gold foil, about 1/10,000th of an inch. So it's very, very, very thin. And he's shooting alpha particles at it. His analogy was it's kind of like shooting a bowling ball at tissue paper. Okay, it's going to go right through. But once in a while, they expected that the bowling ball or the alpha particle would get deflected by whatever's in the gold foil, whatever the nature of that was. And sure enough, they put detectors all the way around it, and they found that, yes, it was being deflected, sometimes at really wide angles. And in fact, sometimes the alpha particles would bounce back. Well, forget a bowling ball to bounce back from a tissue paper means there's got to be something in the tissue paper that's the density and weight of a bowling ball. And of course, that's how we discovered the nucleus. What does that mean to me? Unless you know something about how to detect things, the nature of matter is something you will never understand. The same thing is true for spiritual things. When you learn to detect spiritual things, you will detect them all the time. It happens regularly. It's powerful. It's wonderful. So put that little detector all the way around yourself, shoot the alpha particles at it, and see what happens. Because it's real and it's awesome. Another thing I want to share is something I like to share in my classes. Some of my students have already seen this, so you know all about it. This is one of my favorite demonstrations of the laws of physics. So I have a couple of tubes. By the way, the copper tube, the slits are perfect. They're only for the purpose of you being able to see what's going on inside. They do nothing else other than allow visibility because copper's not transparent. So we take this piece of metal, put it in a plastic tube, and it falls like a rock. Nothing exciting. Take this one, put it in there, and it falls like a rock. Nothing exciting. Now we take a copper tube and put this one in it and drop it. Falls like a rock. Nothing exciting yet, right? Well, something exciting better happen, or this is a very meaningless demonstration. So we put this in there and drop it, and it does not drop like a rock. Now, what's the object of this lesson? How many of you know what's causing this to happen, by the way? Several, but by no means the majority. You don't have to understand anything about how this works to know that it's real. You don't have to sense it by any of your 5 senses, whatever's causing this to happen. But it's real. Same is true with spiritual things. Develop that sense. You don't have to fully understand how God communicates. You just have to know how to make it work. I really believe that with all my heart. Now, if you want to come up and do this for yourself after the lecture, please come and do it. This is the only one that's interesting, so I'll leave the other piece of metal up there. It's not interesting. I'll leave it here. You can choose which one you want to drop. But please feel free to come and do that, and we'll talk about how it works because you may want to know, but if you don't, that's okay too. So in conclusion, this is one of my favorite thoughts of the day that I shared in my class. I think it was just yesterday. Dr. Seuss, you wouldn't expect him to be on spiritual thought of the day. This is from, I had trouble in getting to Sola Salou. I've heard there are troubles of more than one kind. Some come from ahead and some come from behind. But I've bought a big bat. I'm already, you see, now my troubles are going to have troubles with me. Now, I heard this at a commencement for the student that was, being honored as the student of the year. And I really liked it, but I thought, there's got to be something deeper there. What is this big bat? And how can I buy it? So I did some study, and this is what I came up with from President M. Russell Ballard, and I can't read it from this angle. If we do our best to keep the commandments of God, come what may, we will be all right. Of course, that does not necessarily mean that we will be spared personal suffering and heartache. Righteousness has never precluded adversity. But faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, real faith, whole-souled and unshakable, is a power to be reckoned with in the universe. It can be a source of inner strength through which we find peace, comfort, and the courage to hope. That is my prayer for each of you, that you will buy that big bat of faith in God, faith in Jesus Christ, because it works. And your troubles will now have troubles with you. And I feel I should close in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you.
Barry, we're gonna have you stay up here just a little bit longer if that's okay, and do a little Q&A. This is an opportunity in the moment to ask some questions of Dr. Lunt. He's lived a life that I could only imagine living, and we'd like you to ask questions that are on your mind. They can be simple ones, they can be spiritual ones, they can be career technical ones. You can ask him to explain this. But let's just take a few minutes, and during that time, I'll see if I can get our QR code up as well.
There you go. Thank you. Yes, over there. VCR tapes are very much electromagnetic, just like half-inch tape that I've talked about here. Same idea, but VCR tapes are analog and these are digital. That's the biggest difference. Yes.
What habits would you say help you maintain like your spirituality and this devotion you have to electrical engineering?
That's a fabulous question. Daily scripture study by far. I can't live a day without it. I can't. I just can't find myself close to the Spirit unless I'm studying scriptures every day, earnestly trying to understand what God wants me to learn. And of course, prayer. I think those go very much hand in hand. Worshiping to me means trying to become like Christ. And then, of course, attending to the meetings that I'm asked to be part of. Very much a part of everything I try to do. Appreciate that. Yes, Das.
Plus,
I love it.
so while you were going, I think, I was trying to think of myself being in your shoes, and the one common thing that came up was it's intimidating. It's really intimidating. Oh my goodness, he's going through all these changes. That's intimidating for me. So what do you ask the big guy? Like, how do you keep on getting peace and all that? But what do you do to get that? Where are you finding this peace? Because to me, this is a stressful life. I can't even imagine having peace without, the gospel and all that. So how do you make that work?
That's a really deep question. And that gets right back to, the two examples that I closed with, sensing alpha particles and the presence of the nucleus of an atom, and knowing why one of these pieces of metal drops slowly through a tube, but it's real, even though we don't understand it. Do I understand all of the spiritual processes that work? No. Do I understand that they do work? Absolutely. How do I know? By one piece of experience at a time. You are personal enough to, can I share this, Das? Das has been kind enough, and he's in my class this semester. He's been kind enough to share that he's not a member of the church that we belong to, our sponsoring institution, but that he has had a spiritual experience. Was it a week and a half ago? That's the starting point. It is God reaching out to you. It is Him giving a message. In my experience, they're usually very subtle. You got to be careful and listen. You have to have a quiet place, away from all the noise and interference of the world, like I shared in class about finding my own sacred grove. I find that to be essential. I hope that helps. Thank you. Yes.
Do you ever had a time in your life where you questioned your faith or your faith has wavered?
Her question, in case you couldn't hear over there, have I ever had a time in my life when my faith wavered, and how did I get past that? And yes, that happens to probably everybody, and certainly our son passing away, and then some of the other responsibilities that I had that felt overwhelming to me were times like that. But I never had a time when I felt that God wasn't there. Never felt that I couldn't reach out to Him and get the help that I needed. I've always believed that. And I guess because I believed it, it works. I think in many ways, belief is a decision. If you choose to believe that God is real, you will find the evidence. If you choose to believe He's not real, you'll probably find evidence to not believe Him. But I testify that the truth is God is real, and He does reach out to us. And that's always gotten me through everything. Appreciate the question. Yes.
But I think as engineering students and a lot of us as members of the church is burnout.
Yeah.
And I think that it seems like you have lived a life full of lots and lots of things. How do you avoid that? How do you cope with work and church?
Yeah. Wonderful question. In all cases, it's been submitting my will to the Lord. What is it that you want me to do? God never asks you to do something impossible. First Nephi chapter 3, verse 7, right? He never asks you to do something impossible. So if He asks you to do it, you just need to find the way to do it. And to me, that completely takes the stress away. Plus, let me share a short story that relates directly to that. I find writing to be very arduous and difficult. If I think that I've got a paper to write, I dread it. Oh, what else can I do before that? Because I don't want to do that. It's painful. I had a summer when I was going to be working for IBM in Vermont without my family. And so I knew every night when I'd come home from work, I would have several hours with nothing that needed to be done because it wasn't my home to work on and my wife wasn't there and I couldn't spend time with the kids and so forth. So I was praying about what can I do? And the answer I got was write your book. I knew immediately what book it was I was supposed to write. It became one of the textbooks that I wrote, by the way. The amazing miracle to me there was that every day when I finished work at IBM in Burlington, Vermont, going back to my little apartment, the Spirit came and I immediately felt excited to work on that book. How did that happen? That's not my natural state. I don't find writing something I look forward to do. But all summer long, I did. And when you feel that spiritual direction, the stress goes away. It just disappears. You feel peace. I hope that helps. Yeah, it's made a huge difference. Yes. His question was, is there a piece of advice that I would give my college-age self if I could go back and talk to him? Stick to it. It's always worth it. And by it, I mean trust in the Lord. Trust that He will help you and guide you. So yeah, I would go back to my teenage self and say, it's true. God is real. Jesus Christ is real. And following them is by far the best thing you can ever do. Thank you for the question. Others? Thank you, Ryan.
Let's thank Dr. Lunt one more time. Thank you all for coming. We have, I believe, some more food left over and some cookies that we're supposed to, there they are, pull out. While you're eating a cookie, please do take our little survey. We'd love your feedback. We're still figuring this out, but we're doing okay. I think that was incredible. Thank you again. And we'll see you next semester. We're going to try to have 2 more. Thanks for coming.